Chapter 17, The Onukachuk. Greetings, Earthlings. We share with you not our story today, but one that needs to be told of a long-forgotten time on Earth. A war long ago that was not documented between the Mongolians and their neighbors who lived in the Himalayas. This memory has threads relevant to how you move forward as a species. There are many forgotten memories of Earth, and they are not to be cast aside with a placement of the ego, saying that you know all you need to learn from the past. Repeated cycles are rearing their heads once more, for humans to release what no longer serves them, once and for all. This war began with strife between the king of Mongolia and his daughter, who had fallen in love with a messenger boy that lived with the Himalayan people. There was a long-withstanding rule that the hand of the king's daughter would go to the ruler's firstborn son of the neighboring nation. This way, peace was kept between the lands, and prosperity would continue. When the king's daughter began to have feelings for the messenger who connected the people from Mongolia and the Himalayas, her father threatened his daughter to not see the boy again or suffer the consequences of betraying the crown. Isabetta was the king's daughter's name, and she had no intention of continuing with tradition or listening to her father. She knew her own heart, and it was time for the rules to change. She had the heart of a warrior and held a great love for her people. Isabetta and the messenger boy made a plan for her to escape the palace and reunite unto the fall of night to live their lives together, away from mutiny and discourse. However, their plan did not come to fruition. The king prepared for this, and his guards found them before they escaped, and took her to the dungeons after he killed the messenger, her love, in front of her. Days passed as Isabetta lay defeated in the dungeons. Sorrow and deep grief filled her heart. After what felt like weeks in the grime and cold of her cell, a plan began to form in her mind. She knew she must rise to help her people and overtake her father. Isabetta understood her people. She knew of the hardships they went through and the deep love they have for one another. Isabetta also understood that a soul thrives in love, kindness, and compassion. As a child growing up in the kingdom, she witnessed time and time again the brutality of her father and the harshness he bestowed upon others. Even with all the cruelty and dishonor that he led with, she knew there was another way. In hindsight, she was grateful for seeing these dark layers, for this would be the opposite of how she would lead. She devised a plan to send word to one of her ladies-in-waiting to visit her in the dungeons. Long ago, her ladies-in-waiting, her team she calls them, trained physically in secret with some of the kingdom guards. They trained to strengthen their bodies and be prepared in case there was a physical attack. Their training was done discreetly at night, far below their living quarters. With Isabetta living in tyrannical conditions throughout her life, she was now prepared for this moment. Many plans were devised throughout the years with Isabetta's team. Plans of escape, taking over, and executing her father. Isabetta was not an unkind soul. She did love her father at one time, long ago. However, there's only so much a human can witness before they see the truth of the person before them. Her father was a broken man. Through anger, control, and hate, he was able to keep, he felt, himself intact. In this era, humans did not live as long as they do today. Isabetta's father rose to the top from tragedy that came upon his family with the death of his mother and brothers. Sickness, murder, and heartache were the cause of his family's deaths. After their passing, Isabetta's grandfather pushed down his grief and buried himself in war as Isabetta's father watched on. He led legions of men to their deaths with unnecessary fighting. Anger was the only emotion that fueled him. This anger stayed with him until his crossing, leaving Isabetta's father to pick up the pieces. Unfortunately, Isabetta's father continued this anger with vengeance through war and overtaking anything and anyone on his path. Isabetta's father killed the king of Mongolia, with no one else knowing, and stepped into the role by sheer default of his strength and successful outcomes in war. He was so feared within the country that no other dared to speak up or change the ways, for it would be their death. Isabetta knew of her father's and grandfather's struggles. She also knew that to break the cycle, one must rise and face the challenge, no matter the outcome. Right now, her father was that challenge. She knew he was too far in his need to control others, and that his demand would not be broken until his time on the throne ended. There was no second, third, or fourth chances. The message was sent to her team from one of her trusted guards. Hours later, in the dead of night, a member of her team came with the keys to open her cell, fresh clothing for Isabetta, and an escape route. She would have time later to clean up. For now, she changed into her fresh clothes and filled her old clothes with straw. She wanted to give her father the illusion that she was still in the dungeons. Time was of the essence. Isabetta followed her trusted friend through tunnels and passageways that Isabetta did not even know existed. After many hours of walking at a rushed pace, a doorway came before them. It was a circular doorway with a small latch on it. They unlocked and pulled the door together as it opened to the hills that were far away from the kingdom. The prior Mongolian king made this escape route, and her father had no idea it was there. Isabetta's team was waiting for her as she stepped out of the door, and they decided to forge ahead with their plan of executing her father. Even though Isabetta felt this was exactly what her father had done to the prior king, she knew if her father lived, there would be those trying to set him free and allow him to lead once more. Shortly after Isabetta's escape, her father discovered she was missing. A search went out for weeks trying to find her. Her father was beyond furious. For those that lived under the same roof as him, it was a time of sheer terror. The entire kingdom was on pins and needles, with Isabetta missing. Her father announced through the lands, with every passing day she was gone, a patron of their villages would be killed until Isabetta faced her father. Once Isabetta received this news, their plans changed slightly. However, they still went full steam ahead. The day the killings were to begin, Isabetta entered the kingdom and announced her arrival. With many guards surrounding her, she was led to her father. Her father, who had no attachment to his daughter after her so-called betrayal, took in the sight of her as she stood before him. "Father, what are you doing killing innocent people? I stand before you to ask you to stop. Stop this way of terror. There is another way." With this, Isabetta's father roared back in laughter. "You are no daughter of mine. The day you left this kingdom with your messenger was the day you turned your back on me and what was once yours. Now the kingdom will see to your betrayal, and you will answer for your sins. Guards, take her out to the courtyard for all to see the cutting off of her head." Isabetta was taken by the guards to the courtyard in front of their residence, and a block of wood was placed in the center. Isabetta knew her team was watching and waiting for her signal. She also knew this plan might not work, and this would be the end of her life. However, she had hope in her heart that this would be the end of her father's reign. A large horn blasted throughout the kingdom for all to come and see the event. Many villagers gathered and surrounded Isabella. Many were shocked and heartbroken that their beloved Isabella's fate would end this way. As the king entered near the crowds, he spoke of Isabella's betrayal to the crown, kingdom, and lands, and all that resided here knew the punishment was death. He asked Isabella before raising his sword if she had any last words. Isabella looked up at her father and then out onto the crowd. On bended knees, she said, there is another way of leading. Through love, acceptance, dignity, and honor, we can rise together and change the ways of our kingdom and lands. Let us. And with those last words, her father held up the sword and was shot by an arrow in his heart. Arrow after arrow plummeted into the king's chest from all around the courtyard. Isabella's team uncloaked their disguises and ran to her aid. The king lay dying on the ground before her. Isabella's team went into action, disarming the guards. The crowd was shocked and stepped back in silence. Isabella moved over to her father and took his hand. One day, Father, you will see there was another way. However, it's not in this lifetime and may not be in your next. I am sorry for ending your life. I am breaking your cycle of ruling in terror to one of peace. May your transition to the next life be easier on your soul. Her father looked Isabella in the eyes. He could not speak as the arrows had damaged his lungs. He smiled at Isabella. However, this was not a smile of "I love you." This was a smile that said, "Well done, daughter. This is exactly what I would have done too." Isabella fell back and let go of her father's hand. How could she rule a kingdom if this was the foundation it was built upon, with plans of death and betrayal? Isabella felt like she had been kicked in the stomach. She was sickened with what she had just done. She got up and turned to speak to the crowd. "My fellow Mongolians, you know me. You have pleaded with me for change, which I offer you now. With me as your ruler, we seek acceptance and peace for all. We will train women and men to guard our kingdom against invaders. We bring our power back to ourselves, with no fear or terror ruling anymore." The crowds cheered and spoke Isabella's name over and over again. Her team gathered the guards and they followed Isabella into the kingdom. She asked for their loyalty to her and their realm. If they did not accept, they were free to go and live in peace. All the guards went down on one knee, pledging to Isabella. All the guards were loyal to her, protecting Isabella and the kingdom. And they did this by sacrificing their own lives, if need be. Once the ceremony was concluded, Isabella and her team excused themselves and went to work for immediate change for the kingdom. Word was first sent out to their neighboring lands of Isabella as their new ruler. They would not hide that Isabella's team assassinated her father. Isabella wanted to rule with a clean slate. However, once Isabella was alone in her old chambers, her father's smile played repeatedly in her mind. Even with her intent to rule peacefully, she felt she was no better than her father. Isabella did rule for several years with her team by her side, with peace and harmony for her people. However, she was never able to release the shackles of her father fully. Isabella second-guessed her decisions, eventually allowing fear to overtake her and the kingdom from threats of leaders wanting to overtake their prosperous lands. Isabella died of heart failure in her early 30s before her kingdom was taken. We share the story of Isabella and her father as threads from this memory are happening to many humans now. There are humans currently on Earth who have affected many lightworkers, starseeds, and awakened ones through deceit, harm, and manipulation. These cords must be cut and healed to continue forward on your path. As these cords are cut, one must take the time to grieve and heal the heart. Relationships in many humans' lives are drastically changing. This is for the better. It may not feel like it at the time. However, in the long run, you will see this for your benefit and for your light to expand at its fullest potential. In the first book, there are teachings on how to cut these cords. This is the pathway to healing the heart through time and sitting with the grief of the relationship removed from your life. Be gentle and kind with yourself as this occurs. Cutting relationships from your life is a challenging task. Awakenings and epiphanies will also happen during this time as you further separate yourself from those that did not have your best intentions at heart.